The scent of stale coffee and scorched grease clung to the air, a perfume Alara had long stopped noticing. It was just the smell of survival. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour diner hummed a weary, buzzing tune, reflecting off the streaks she'd left on the chrome napkin dispenser. It was 2 a.m. Her feet ached with a familiar, deep-seated throb, a pain that radiated from her soles all the way up to the base of her spine. 1 more hour. 1 more hour and she could go home to Leo. The thought of him was a warm, steady glow in the hollow of her chest. Her son. Her entire world, encapsulated in a 7-year-old body that housed a spirit brighter than the sun, even if his own body didn't always cooperate. She glanced at the counter behind the register, where a small, framed photo sat propped against the salt shakers. Leo, grinning, his head tilted to one side, his mismatched eyes, one a warm hazel, the other a startling, pale silver, sparkling with mischief. His wheelchair was just visible at the edge of the frame, a part of him, but not the whole of him. Never the whole of him. The bell above the door chimed, a tinny, jarring sound in the quiet hum of the diner. Alara straightened, forcing a tired smile that felt like cracking plaster. Welcome to the corner booth. Table for one. The man who stepped inside didn't just enter the room, he consumed it. The space seemed to shrink, the air growing thick and heavy, charged with an energy that prickled her skin. He was tall, impossibly so, dressed in a dark, exquisitely tailored coat that probably cost more than her car. His hair was the color of a moonless night, and his face was all sharp angles and severe beauty, like a statue carved from unforgiving stone. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They were the color of ancient ice, and they swept over the empty diner with a predatory stillness that made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. He wasn't looking for a meal. He was a hunter, and this cheap, greasy spoon was the last place a creature like him should be. His gaze stopped, snagging on the photograph behind her. A flicker of something unreadable, shock, disbelief, a pain so profound it was almost violent, crossed his features before being locked down behind a mask of cold control. He moved toward the counter, his steps silent, unnervingly so. He didn't walk, he flowed. Where did you get that picture? His voice was a low, resonant rumble, like stones grinding together deep underground. It vibrated through the worn linoleum floor, through the soles of her cheap sneakers, and settled deep in her bones. Alara's hand instinctively went to the small silver locket she wore, a nervous habit. I'm sorry. He was closer now, standing on the other side of the counter, but the space between them felt like nothing. He leaned forward slightly, his scent reaching her, ozone, night air, and something ancient, like cold earth and forgotten spices. The boy, he said, his voice raw, insistent. The child in the photograph. Where is he? Her protective instincts, honed to a razor's edge by years of single motherhood, flared hot and sharp. He's my son. And who are you to be asking? The man's eyes, those chips of ice, locked onto hers. The world seemed to tilt, the buzzing of the lights fading into a dull roar in her ears. She felt an overwhelming, crushing wave of sorrow and loss pour off him, so potent it made her own grief over a life she'd never have feel like a pinprick. And beneath it, a desperate, terrifying hope. My name is Kaelan, he said, and the name itself felt heavy, weighted with centuries. And I believe he is my son, too. The words hung in the air, absurd and impossible. Alara stared at him, a laugh bubbling in her throat, a hysterical, jagged thing. This man, this creature of midnight and power, claiming her Leo. You're mistaken, she said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to keep it steady. His father is long gone before Leo was even born, a ghost who'd left her with nothing but a broken heart and the greatest gift of her life. Kaelan's gaze dropped to the locket at her throat, the one she was still clutching. May I, he asked, his voice softer now, but no less commanding. Before she could answer, he reached across the counter. His fingers, cool and impossibly strong, brushed against hers as he gently took the locket. He didn't try to open it. He simply held it, his thumb stroking the worn silver surface. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up her arm. It wasn't just a physical touch, it was a recognition. A feeling of coming home to a place she'd never been. Her breath hitched. This was hers, Kalen murmured, his eyes closing for a fraction of a second. The pain that radiated from him was a physical blow. I gave it to Lyra on the night of our bonding. He looked up, and the ice in his eyes had thawed into a vast, desolate sea of grief. She fled my court almost 300 years ago. I was told she perished in the wild lands, that our child was lost with her. 300 years. The number was so insane, so utterly beyond comprehension, that Alara's mind simply refused to process it. Vampire. The word screamed in the back of her thoughts, a relic of fiction and folklore that suddenly felt chillingly, terrifyingly real. That's impossible, she whispered. His eyes, Kalen pressed, his voice cracking with an emotion so raw it made her ache in sympathy. Does he have one eye of silver? The mark of my bloodline. The mark of the heir. Alara's blood ran cold. She could feel the color draining from her face. How could he know? She'd always told people it was just heterochromia, a genetic quirk. But the way he said it, the mark of my bloodline. I need to see him, Kalen stated, not a request, but a decree. The sheer force of his will was a tangible thing, pressing in on her, demanding she yield. But she was Leo's mother. Her will was forged in hospital waiting rooms and late-night therapy sessions, in battles with insurance companies and ignorant strangers. It was a will made of pure, unyielding love. No, she said, pulling her locket back, her knuckles white. You don't get to just walk in here after centuries and make demands. You don't know him. You don't know us. The bell on the door chimed again. A trucker, burly and bleary-eyed, ambled in and slid into a booth, oblivious to the silent, cataclysmic war being waged at the counter. The spell was broken. Alara took a shaky breath, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Kalen's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek. He looked from her to the oblivious customer, and a flicker of his control returned. Your shift ends soon, he said, his voice once again a low, controlled rumble. I will wait. We will go to him. Together. He moved to a booth in the far corner, sinking into the shadows, his presence a dark, brooding storm cloud in her small, mundane world. He didn't order. He just watched her, his gaze unwavering, patient, and filled with a terrifying certainty that had nothing to do with this life, and everything to do with a life she couldn't possibly imagine. An hour had never felt so long. The drive home was a silent, tension-filled ordeal. Kalen had followed her beat-up sedan in a sleek, black car that looked more like a panther than a machine. He parked behind her in the crumbling lot of her apartment complex, the powerful vehicle looking utterly alien against the backdrop of peeling paint and overgrown weeds. Every step toward her front door felt heavy, surreal. His presence behind her was a constant, oppressive weight. She unlocked the door to apartment 2B, her hands trembling. The air inside was warm, smelling faintly of lavender from Leo's bath and the lingering scent of chicken nuggets. It was small, cluttered with a life lived on a razor-thin budget, but it was theirs. It was safe. Until now. Leo was asleep on the couch, where he'd drifted off waiting for her. He was curled on his side, his favorite worn blanket, a soft, blue thing with faded stars, tucked under his chin. His chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of sleep. His specialized leg braces lay on the floor beside him, a testament to the day's hard-won battles with physical therapy. Alara turned, positioning herself between the sleeping boy and the ancient creature in her doorway. He's sleeping. Kalen paid her no mind. His gaze was fixed on Leo, and the sound he made was not human. It was a strangled, guttural noise of pure, unadulterated agony. The king who had commanded armies, who had lived through the fall of empires, took a faltering step into the room, his knees seeming to buckle. He reached out a hand, then let it fall, as if afraid the very air around his son would shatter. His composure, the cold mask of the monarch, had completely crumbled. What was left was a being hollowed out by grief, now faced with a miracle he couldn't touch. He saw the braces on the floor. He saw the slight, delicate frame of his son, the visible fragility of his human life. He sank to his knees on the threadbare carpet of her living room, and for the first time, Elara saw not a monster or a king, but a father. His shoulders shook with silent, racking sobs. The sight broke something inside her. The fear, the anger, it all dissolved into a wave of empathy so powerful it stole her breath. This was the source of the crushing sorrow she'd felt in the diner. Centuries of it. His legs, Kaelan choked out, his voice a shredded whisper. The healers of my court, they could have, he couldn't finish. The guilt was a physical poison, twisting his handsome features into a mask of torment. He had failed his son before he had even known he existed. Elara found herself moving, kneeling beside him, her hand hovering in the air before she rested it gently on his shaking shoulder. The fabric of his coat was impossibly fine, but beneath it, she felt muscles coiled as tight as steel cables. His name is Leo, she said softly. He has cerebral palsy. It's not a weakness, Kaelan. He's the strongest person I know. He loves drawing monsters, and he tells the worst jokes you've ever heard. He's happy. Kaelan finally looked at her, his icy eyes shimmering with unshed tears. The vulnerability there was staggering. It was like staring into the heart of a dying star. You, he breathed, his gaze tracing her features as if seeing her for the first time. You have kept him safe. You have loved him. When I had nothing but a memory of his mother. A strange warmth bloomed in her chest, a pull toward this impossible, grieving man. It was more than empathy. It was deeper, a resonant hum that seemed to echo in her very soul. The bond? The thing he had spoken of with Lyra. It was real, and it was terrifying. Leo stirred on the couch, making a soft murmuring sound in his sleep. He shifted, his face turning toward the dim light from the hallway. And in that moment, his eyes fluttered open. One hazel, one a luminous, ethereal silver. They blinked slowly, focusing on the two figures kneeling on the floor. He didn't look scared. A sleepy, curious smile touched his lips. He looked at Kaelan, his silver eye seeming to glow with an inner light. Hi, he whispered, his voice soft with sleep. You're shiny. Kaelan's breath hitched, a ragged, painful sound. He slowly, hesitantly, reached out a hand, his long, pale fingers trembling. Leo watched him, his gaze unwavering, and then he reached out his own small hand, placing it in Kaelan's much larger one. The moment their skin touched, the air in the room crackled. A faint, golden light seemed to shimmer around them, a warmth that had nothing to do with the faulty heater in the wall. Elara felt it too, a current that flowed from them, through her, connecting them all in an unbreakable circuit. Kaelan's heart, the one he thought had turned to stone centuries ago, shattered into a million pieces. And in its breaking, it finally began to beat again. For the son he had thought lost, and for the woman who had been his guardian angel. From Kaelan's perspective, the world had been a grayscale canvas for nearly 3 centuries. Colors had faded, tastes had dulled, emotions had become pale imitations of what he remembered. He ruled his kingdom, a vast, nocturnal empire hidden in the shadows of the human world, with a cold, precise efficiency. He was just, he was powerful, but he was empty. The loss of Lyra, and the child she carried, had carved out his soul, leaving behind a hollow cavern where a heart used to be. He had searched for her, for any trace, for decades, until hope itself had withered and died, turning to bitter dust. Then he had felt it. A flicker. A resonance of his bloodline, so faint he'd almost dismissed it. A pinprick of light in an endless darkness. It was impossible, a phantom limb aching for what was lost. But it had persisted, a faint, insistent whisper on the currents of the world. He had followed it, abandoning his throne, his duties, his entire existence, driven by a madness he refused to name hope. It had led him across continents, to this small, insignificant town, to a diner that smelled of human despair and fried food. And then he saw the photograph. The boy. His boy. The silver eye was unmistakable, a beacon in the night. It was the mark of the Valerus line, a direct link to the source of their power. To see it in a cheap plastic frame, on a greasy countertop, was a sacrilege, a miracle, a knife to the gut. The woman, the waitress, tired and weary, stood before him, a fierce lioness guarding her cub, and he felt another jolt, a different kind of recognition. A pull not of blood, but of soul. A cord he thought had been severed forever with Lyra's death, now vibrating with a new, terrifying song. His mate. Fate was a cruel, poetic bastard. Now, kneeling on the floor of her cramped, humble home, holding his son's hand, the grayscale world exploded into vibrant, agonizing color. The warmth of the boy's skin was a brand, the trust in his mismatched eyes a judgment. He saw the braces on the floor, the worn-out couch, the woman's exhausted face, and every second of the last 300 years became a personal failure. His son, a prince of the blood, had struggled. He had known pain. He had known want. All while Kaelan sat on a throne of cold stone, ruling over shadows and memories. The guilt was a physical entity, trying to claw its way up his throat. He wanted to roar, to shatter the building, to unleash a storm of rage and grief that would tear the world apart. But he looked at Leo's trusting face, and at Alara's cautious, compassionate one, and he knew that the monster inside him had to remain caged. For them, he had to be more than a king. He had to learn to be a man again. A father. The days that followed were a tightrope walk over a chasm of cultural and existential differences. Kaelan insisted they were not safe. Now that he had found his heir, the scent of his bloodline would be a beacon to his enemies. His kingdom was rife with factions who would see a half-human, disabled child as a weakness to be exploited, an impurity to be purged. He spoke of ancient rivalries and blood feuds with a casualness that made Alara's stomach clench. "You will come with me," he stated, standing in her kitchen the next morning. "It wasn't a request. I have a compound. It's shielded. You will be protected. This is our home," Alara shot back, her hands on her hips, her chin jutting out. She was trying to make Leo's breakfast, a simple bowl of oatmeal, but Kaelan's presence filled the tiny space, making it impossible to think. "You can't just rip us out of our lives. Your life is in danger." "His life is in danger," Kaelan countered, his voice low and intense. "Every moment you remain here is a risk I will not take." The Alpha, the king, was asserting his authority. It was all he knew. But Alara was not one of his subjects. "I am his mother. I decide what's best for him. And I don't know you." A flicker of hurt crossed his face, so quick she almost missed it. "You will," he said, his tone softening. "Let me earn that trust. Let me protect what you have so fiercely guarded." He looked past her, at Leo, who was sitting at the small kitchen table in his chair, watching them with wide, intelligent eyes. "Please, Alara." The plea, from a being of such immense power, was her undoing. It was the first time he had truly asked, not commanded. It was the first sign that he was willing to learn her language, the language of partnership, not dominance. She finally, reluctantly, agreed. The compound was less a house and more a small kingdom, carved into the side of a mountain, hidden from the world by means she couldn't comprehend. Gleaming obsidian walls, vast halls that echoed with silence, and gardens that bloomed under an enchanted moonlight. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly sterile. It was a palace, but it wasn't a home. Kalen tried. He filled a suite of rooms with everything Leo could possibly need or want. Toys, art supplies, a state-of-the-art physical therapy room with equipment that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. But he was clumsy in his affection, an ancient predator trying to learn how to be gentle. He would stand in the doorway, watching Leo draw, his posture rigid, his hands clenched at his sides, a desperate longing in his eyes. One afternoon, Ilara found him in the therapy room, staring at a set of parallel bars. "The healers are on their way," he said without turning. "The best in my kingdom. They will study his condition. They believe they can correct it." Ilara's blood ran cold. "Correct it? There is nothing to correct," she said, her voice sharp. "It's a part of who he is. You can't just wave a magic wand and change him. I can give him a life without pain. A life where he can run, can stand on his own 2 feet, as the heir to my throne should." The frustration and helplessness boiled over in his voice. "His strength isn't in his legs, Kalen. It's in his heart. In his mind." She walked toward him, forcing him to look at her. "Don't you see how incredible he already is? Don't try to fix him. Just love him as he is." The truth of her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had been so focused on what his son lacked, on his own perceived failure to provide a perfect, princely body, that he had failed to see the vibrant, perfect soul already there. He looked past her, through the open door, to where Leo was concentrating on a drawing, his tongue sticking out in concentration. He was drawing a picture of a tall, dark king with sad eyes, a smiling woman with tired eyes, and a little boy in a chair holding both their hands. That night, Kalen came to her rooms. He didn't speak, just held out a hand. Hesitantly, she took it. He led her to a balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens. The air was cool, scented with night-blooming jasmine. "Tell me about him," he said softly. "Tell me everything." And so she did. She told him about Leo's first word, his first laugh. She told him about the endless nights in the hospital after his birth, the fear and the uncertainty. She told him about Leo's stubborn refusal to give up, his fierce determination to do things for himself. She spoke of his kindness, his empathy, his weird obsession with dinosaurs. She painted a portrait of her son, not with pity, but with a fierce, burning pride. Kalen listened, his gaze never leaving her face. He was drinking in the stories, filling the 300-year-old hole in his memory. When she was done, tears were tracking silently down her cheeks. He reached up, his thumb gently brushing a tear away. His touch was no longer just a jolt of supernatural energy, it was warm, tender. "You are a marvel, Ilara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You have been his sun, his moon, and all his stars. Lyra, she would have loved you." "And his father?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The one who left me." Kalen's expression hardened. "A human. Insignificant. He was merely a vessel Lyra used to hide the child's true nature, to mask his scent in a mortal bloodline. He abandoned you because he was weak. I will not make the same mistake." The vow hung between them, a promise forged in moonlight and regret. In that moment, the bond between them solidified, no longer just a pull of fate, but a conscious, deliberate choice. The first sign of trouble was subtle. A shadow moving too quickly at the edge of the compound's wards. A scent on the wind that made the guards restless. Kalen grew more tense, his protective instincts on a knife's edge. He rarely left her or Leo's side. The forced proximity was no longer just for safety, it was becoming a comfortable, natural state of being. They were falling into a domestic rhythm, an odd, supernatural family in a gilded cage. The attack came not from the outside, but from within. A betrayal. One of Kalen's own council, a vampire named Malachi, who had long coveted the throne, had disabled the inner wards. He saw Leo not as an heir, but as an abomination, a half-breed weakness that would taint their pure bloodline. And he saw Alara as the human filth who had ensnared his king. It happened in the gardens. Alara was pushing Leo in his chair along a path lined with glowing moon-petal flowers. The air was peaceful. Leo was laughing, pointing out a particularly bright bloom. Then, the world dissolved into chaos. 4 figures, clad in black, moved out of the shadows, their speed a blur. Their eyes glowed with a feral red light. Malachi stood behind them, a cruel, triumphant smirk on his face. "The king grows soft," Malachi sneered. "Besotted with a mortal and her defective spawn." Alara's blood turned to ice. She spun the wheelchair round, putting her own body between Leo and the threat. Her heart hammered in her chest, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. "Mama?" Leo's voice was small, frightened. "It's okay, baby," she said, her own voice shaking. "Just close your eyes." Before the attackers could reach them, a blow of black fury descended from the sky. Kalen. He had been on the balcony, watching them. He landed between his family and the assassins, his form no longer just a handsome man in a fine coat. He was a creature of ancient, terrible power. His eyes were blazing silver, fangs elongated, a low, guttural snarl ripping from his chest that was the sound of death itself. The fight was brutal and swift. Kalen moved like a phantom, a whirlwind of controlled violence. He was a king defending his territory, but more than that, he was a father defending his child. The rage pouring off him was a palpable force, a cold, killing fire. But there were 4 of them, and Malachi was powerful. While Kalen was engaged with 2 of the assassins, a third lunged for Alara and Leo. Time seemed to slow down. Alara saw the vampire's fangs, the hunger in its red eyes. There was nowhere to run. She braced herself for the impact, for the pain, shielding Leo with her entire being. And then, something inside Leo snapped. A wave of pure energy, shimmering and silver, erupted from the small boy. It wasn't violent, it was defensive, a powerful, concussive force that threw the attacking vampire back 10 feet, sending it crashing into a stone fountain. The air crackled with power. Leo's silver eye was glowing so brightly it was hard to look at, and the air around him hummed with a strange, ancient song. Everyone froze. The assassins, Kalen, even Malachi stared in shock at the small, disabled boy in the wheelchair, who had just displayed a level of raw, untamed power not seen in their bloodline for a millennium. The distraction was all Kalen needed. He dispatched the remaining assassins with ruthless efficiency. He was before Malachi in a heartbeat, his hand clamped around the traitor's throat, lifting him off the ground. "You targeted my son," Kalen snarled, his voice a low, deadly promise of pain. "You threatened my mate," the word hung in the air, a public declaration. "Your life is forfeit." There was a sickening crack, and it was over. Kalen turned, the fury in his eyes instantly melting away, as his gaze fell on Alara and Leo. He rushed to them, his hands hovering over them, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" Alara could only shake her head, her arms wrapped tightly around Leo, who was trembling, the light in his eye fading back to normal. "We are okay," she whispered. Kalen knelt before them, his hand gently cupping Leo's cheek. He looked at his son, not with concern for his fragility, but with sheer, unadulterated awe. "You are more powerful than I ever imagined," he murmured. He then looked at Alara, his expression one of profound gratitude and a love so deep it was bottomless. "And you are braver than any warrior I have ever known." In the aftermath, the compound was in an uproar. The betrayal had shaken the court, but the display of Leo's power had solidified his position. No one would dare call him weak again. That evening, Kalen convened his entire court in the grand throne room. He stood before them, not on the dais, but on the floor with them. Alara stood beside him, holding Leo's hand, his wheelchair next to her. "For centuries, I have ruled alone," Kaelin announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "Today, that changes. I present to you my son, Leo Valerus, the heir to my throne. His power is a testament to our bloodline, and his heart is a testament to his mother's strength." He turned to Alara, taking her free hand. He went down on one knee before her, before his entire court. Gasps rippled through the assembled vampires. A king did not kneel. "Alara," he said, his voice clear and strong, for all to hear. "You are my mate. My fated. But that is not why I ask this. I ask this because you are my partner. My equal. You have taught me the meaning of strength, of family, of love. You have healed a wound I thought was fatal. I am asking you to choose this. To choose me. To choose us. Will you be my queen?" Tears streamed down Alara's face, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of a love she never thought she'd find. She looked down at Leo, who was beaming, his silver eye bright with happiness. This wasn't a command. It was a choice. Her choice. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes." A year later, the obsidian halls of the mountain compound were no longer sterile. They were filled with the sound of laughter. Leo's laughter. He zoomed down the corridors in a new, magically enhanced wheelchair that could keep up with even the swiftest vampire, his giggles echoing off the ancient stone. The throne room now had a corner filled with his drawings of monsters and kings. Alara had found her place, not just as a queen, but as a co-ruler. Her human perspective, her empathy and fierce sense of justice, had tempered Kaelin's ancient severity. She advocated for the weaker members of their society, creating a new era of peace and compassion. She was respected, not because of her bond to the king, but for her own wisdom and strength. Kaelin was a changed man. The ice in his eyes had melted completely, replaced by a warm, steady light. The joy he found in the simplest moments with his family had healed the last of his centuries-old wounds. He was still a powerful king, but now he was a husband and a father first. One evening, Alara found him sitting with Leo in the moonlit gardens, the very spot where they had been attacked. Kaelin was patiently helping Leo with his physical therapy exercises, not to fix him, but to help him build his own strength. They were laughing together over one of Leo's terrible jokes. She leaned against the doorway, watching them, her heart so full she felt it might burst. The scent of coffee and grease felt like a lifetime ago. She had been a survivor, fighting for every scrap. Now, she was thriving. She had found her power, her purpose, and a love that spanned across ages. She walked toward them, and Kaelin looked up, his smile deepening as he saw her. He held out his hand. She took it, completing their circle. Here, in the heart of the night, surrounded by magic and shadows, they were just a family, whole and healed, their broken pieces glued together by a love that was stronger than any throne, and more powerful than any bloodline.